BBC Three Counties Radio.
A Hertfordshire woman has backed her son's decision to refuse a fresh medical test to see if he's fit to be extradited to the USA. Computer hacker Gary McKinnon had until today to make a decision, but his mother Janis from Brookmans Park says he had no real choice. More from Jessica Cooper.
Gary McKinnon, who has Aspergers syndrome, is accused of hacking into Pentagon and NASA computers, but he insists he was looking for evidence of UFOs. Experts say there's a high risk he could kill himself if extradited to America, but ministers want a new report. Gary's mum, Janis, says there have been 4 medical assessments which have found him unfit for trial, and the Home Office should accept those instead of having another one with someone who isn't in a position to diagnose Gary.
The case of computer hacker Gary McKinnon, who's accused of accessing NASA and Pentagon computers, is back in the spotlight this morning. The 46-year-old who has Aspergers syndrome was given until today to decide whether to have a fresh medical test needed to see if he's fit to be extradited. He's refused to have it, but his mum from Hertfordshire says he didn't have a real choice. Janis Sharp, who lives near Hatfield, said it was going to be conducted by someone who wouldn't be able to diagnose his suicide risk, and 4 previous assessments have shown he's unfit for trial. Janis is here, and we'll speak to Janis in just a second, but first of all, we've got Conservative MP David Burrows, is Gary's local MP. Good morning, David.
Good morning.
You've been involved in a number of campaigns supporting Gary. Why?
Why? Well, it's he's my constituent, but more so, he represents a huge issue of human rights, where we need to take the right decision for human rights' sake. It just makes basic sense that someone like Gary, a vulnerable young man who is facing extradition, and all the medical evidence says that he's likely to commit suicide if he is extradited. And this is a young man that should be nowhere facing sort of a deadline, facing effectively a gun against his head. That shouldn't happen, and he should be someone who should be able to face any prosecution and justice in this country and not face the prospect, and the real prospect, that he could lose his life of being extradited to the US.
So you admit that he's broken the law and has to be punished? You're fine with that?
No one's wanting to, and he's certainly not to flee away from any justice. No, of course not.
But you're convinced that the justice should happen in this country, and it shouldn't be happening in the US.
Well, that's right, and there's an imbalance, because no US citizen has been extradited when an offence has been committed on US soil, but Gary is facing it for, what is it, for someone who hacked into US systems, but basically exposed the flaws. And this is 10 years ago. We're talking about a deadline today, but he's had this hanging over him for all these years, and no way should he be facing the situation he's facing today. We've had the medical evidence, we've had the assessments that he's unfit to face trial, that he is sadly suicidal. So let's do the decent and right thing and just stop this extradition here and now.
No, I have to say, because I have to kind of be as fair as I can on this, you sort of downplayed his crime slightly there. He did hack in to NASA and the Pentagon, and yes, he was looking for UFOs or whatever, but that is still a bad thing to have done, a potentially dangerous thing to have done.
It is, and we want to extradite terrorists, don't we? That's what the legislation should be in place for people who are threatening our safety or the safety of other countries. But frankly, Gary is not threatening anyone's safety, is he? And he's someone who, yes, let him be prosecuted, let him be prosecuted for misusing computers, and if that had happened many years ago, he could have faced a sentence in this country and be dealt with. No one's saying don't have that, but let's not a huge sledgehammer to crack what is a nut, and it's just not on. We need to now do the decent thing and just put Gary and indeed Janis, who you'll hear from shortly, out of the misery of 10 years, and let's just stop this extradition here and now.
OK, David, just stay on the line, and Janis is here, and if you want to chip in at any point, you can. We have got Gary's mum, Janis from Hertfordshire, in the studio now. Janis, why isn't Gary going to have this medical examination?
I'll tell you. Can I just tell you first, there's a boy called Ryan Cleary. He admitted hacking into the Pentagon and to NASA and to the Air Force in America. But he's been tried in this country.
Janis, guys, I don't know about that story. I don't want to go into that.
He's been tried in this country.
OK, but I don't know about that story, so I don't want to do that. But why is he not going to have this medical examination?
He's had 3 medical examinations in April by Professor Simon Baron-Cohen, by Professor Turk, and by Dr. Vermeulen, who's a Home Office approved expert in assessing risk. And Gary has been diagnosed as extreme suicide and unfit for trial. How many more can he have? But the problem is, the one that they want him to have have is with a doctor who doesn't have any expertise in Asperger's or autism and cannot diagnose suicide risk in someone with it. And at the court on the 5th of this month, the judges said, of course it should have been an expert in the condition that was appointed, and why wasn't it? So if even the judges agree with us that Gary, there should have been an expert appointed, not asking him to be assessed by someone who has no expertise in the condition.
Why was it someone who wasn't an expert then appointed?
Exactly 2 years ago he was appointed, and we objected at the beginning. The National Autistic Society wrote to the Home Office. They wrote again to the Home Secretary. They said only someone with the expertise can diagnose someone with Asperger's for suicide risk, because people with Asperger's don't have any facial expressions. Their voice is monotone. They don't have any sort of fear in their voice. And as Gary has often said, inside the fires of hell are burning. But if you don't understand the condition, you cannot see it in someone with Asperger's. And that is the problem.
Him refusing to have this medical examination, what is that going to delay the decision on extradition? What effect is that going to have?
No, it's not a refusal. It's an impossibility. Gary has never refused to be assessed by an expert in the field, never. So it's impossible. And we've said now, it's been far too long, that we want to rely on the evidence as it stands. He said countless medical assessments. So basically, Theresa May has to take the evidence as it stands. It's from Simon Baron-Cohen, professor, who's the top in the world in his field. It's from Professor Turk, who's also, beyond reproach. And Dr. Vermeulen worked in Broadmoor. He's a Home Office approved expert in assessing risk, and he's done hundreds of reports and an expert witness for the Home Office. So he cannot, that has to be accepted. It cannot be dismissed at all.
It's in Theresa May's hands.
Yes.
When do you think that a decision is going to be made?
Well, I hope it's this week. I really do. I mean, both the Conservatives and the Lib Dems used Gary's case as a key part of their campaign. Now, don't tell me that they would use a vulnerable man in order for electioneering and then try and sort of send him away, all this time after. No, I don't believe they would do that. I believe Theresa May will refuse to extradite Gary. It's the only compassionate thing to do. And as David says, Gary's never tried to avoid extradition. I mean, not, of course he has. He's never tried to avoid prosecution, sorry. And all we have ever asked is for Gary to be prosecuted in his own country, as every other hacker has and is being at this moment in time.
David Burrows, Gary's local MP. David, what do you think Theresa May... Have you got any clues what her decision might be?
Well, I mean, now, soon after the election, one of the first decision she made as Home Secretary was to move it out of the court process and to say, I'm going to review medical evidence. And that gave us all great hope and expectation that for the first time we'd had a Home Secretary who was now going to not just rely on the court process, the legal game which will go into and from, to actually look at medical evidence. If she looks at the medical evidence and all the medical evidence, then the only answer would be to stop extradition because it breaches his human rights, because he's likely to commit suicide. It is that straightforward and that important. And so I am still very hopeful that if she looks at all the medical evidence, then she will make the right decision.
David, maybe you can answer this. If he went to the States, he'd be facing 60 years in prison. What sentence would he be facing in this country?
Well, if he'd been prosecuted for misuse of computers, then he could have been up to 2 years imprisonment, and he could have served that a long time ago and be done and dusted. And so that's the kind of proportion we're looking at the type of offence it is. It is a serious offence in terms of hacking computers. No one wants that to happen, but let's give it a sense of proportion. And also now they'd have to take account of the fact of the time that Gary served under this, effectively, and it was used. The words were used by Damien Greenwood in opposition of a death sentence, and that's something which we now just need to remove from him, because sadly it could be a reality if he was to be extradited to the US.
Janice, Gary's mum, are you hopeful of a decision in your favour?
Well, I am, especially as the American defence expert who actually advises President Obama and advised Donald Rumsfeld, has come out last week, which is amazing, and said Gary McKinnon should not be prosecuted. He doesn't even want Gary prosecuted, and his colleague also a senior person in the military in America, has said Gary should not be jailed. So for these people in such incredibly senior positions to say this now, I think bodes well for Gary, and I'm fully expecting that Theresa May to say Gary will remain here in the UK.
Cameron spoke to Obama about it, didn't he?
Twice, actually.
Do we know what Obama said?
Yeah, well, he went to Obama during the first joint worldwide press conference in America, and he did the same again a year later in Britain. Perhaps it was the other way around. And President Obama said that it's a British decision that America will respect and accept. No one seems interested anymore in wanting Gary extradited, not the Americans, not the politicians here, but the same advisors who have been advising the last government and were here even during General Pinochet's extradition are the only ones that seem to want it, because they think not extraditing Gary will set a precedent. Well, that's not justice. That can't be what it's based on. It has to be based on the actual facts. And Gary's case could not set a precedent, because we have mental illness in the family going back 3 generations. My grandmother was in a mental institution for 50 years and she died there. Gary's paternal grandmother has schizophrenia. Okay, it sounds awful that, this is in the family, but the point is all of that has to be taken account of. No one else can invent this. It cannot set a precedent.
David, if that's what Obama said, it's up to the UK, then surely that's him basically saying, don't send him over, isn't it?
It is. It's basically giving a green light for us to make the decision ourselves and not just to rely upon sort of the wider sort of relationships with America and the rest of it. And so it does give a free hand to just look and focus purely on Gary, on his medical evidence, and seeing the fact that it would just be unfair and wrong to extradite him. So, yes, obviously the Home Secretary has to weigh all account of all the factors and has to, Janis mentioned the issue of precedent, and no doubt there's advisors saying, hey, don't give any precedent that could, be used by people who are terrorists and the rest of it. But, we've got to the point now where the expectation is, a legitimate expectation is for Gary, is that he shouldn't be extradited. The longer this has gone on, frankly, the more the case is in his favour.
David, we've got to end it there because we're out of time. Thank you very much. That's David Burrows, who's a Conservative MP. He's Gary's local MP. And Janis, who is Gary's mum. I feel Colby saying it. It's fascinating. And let us know when you get a decision, and maybe come back in and let us know how things go.
Right, and Grant Shapps has also been extremely good, I have to say.
Well done, Janis. Thank you very much. Time for this. Let's get the latest travel news now.